Yep. I call to order the Gladstone City Council meeting for October 10th, 2017. It is 6:39 p.m. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming out on this wonderful fall day. Tonight, I know the rain has begun, but that's okay. Tonight on our consent agenda, we have approval of the September 12th regular meeting minutes and the September 26th joint work session minutes, approval of the monthly financial reports, approval of the September check register and bank balances, legal costs on projects, and department head monthly reports for September 2017. Items on our regular agenda are the employment agreement for the city administrator, public hearing on amendments to Title IX of the GMC related to graffiti, public hearing on an addition to Chapter 5.70 to the GMC, implementation of a transient lodging tax, purchase of a combo cleaner vehicle for public works, and city grant policy. Tammy, could you please call the roll?
Councilor Milch?
Here.
Councilor Neese?
Here.
Councilor Tracy?
Present.
Councilor Reisner?
Present.
Councilor McMahon?
Here.
Councilor Mercero?
Here.
Mayor Stemple?
Here. Could everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So to start this evening off, we would like to introduce a couple new employees. Would police officers Jim McFarland and Sebastian Orr come on up? And then we also have a police admin person, Nancy McDonald. Jeff, would you like to introduce them?
Absolutely. To my left is Nancy McDonald. She comes to us to fill in the executive assistant position due to the passing of Maria Aiken, and she's taken on a great body of work that we're trying to get through, and we appreciate her and her 27 years plus of government experience that she brings and her expertise in HR. So we're very excited, very fortunate to have her, even though it might only be 6 months.
2 months, 4 months,
3 month contract. Starting the recruitment tomorrow.
We can delete that. Right here we have Sebastian Orr, who comes to us. He's a Gladstone High School graduate from the class of 2012.
Oh my gosh.
So please do the math on that.
The baby.
He was a Milwaukee cadet and a reserve for us for some time, and we're just proud to have him back from the academy and glad that we have a Gladstone kid that stayed in the community.
Awesome.
And to my right is James McFarland, who started his career 35 years ago. Started with Gladstone, and we're fortunate enough to get him back from Florence, where he was a sergeant at Florence Police Department. Brings a vast amount of experience and knowledge to our department, and we couldn't ask for 3 greater additions. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Welcome. All right. Are there any agenda additions or corrections?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to add an item to the agenda, a new item number 6, settlement agreement between the City of Gladstone and Clackamas County on the pending lawsuit regarding a breach of contract on the library IGA.
All right. So then that moves everything down. Anything else? All right. Business from the audience. Let me make sure I've got this right. So with multiple public hearings, as I mentioned before the meeting started, please fill out the yellow card over on the table there and write which topic you want to speak on. That way we can call you forward at the appropriate time. So do we have business from the audience?
Frank Hernandez?
Frank Hernandez, 585 Barberry Place. It has been reported that I sent a letter to the City of Gladstone. For clarification, I sent a formal grievance letter. In the grievance, I accuse the City Council of 2 violations. The first claim is that Councilors Neese, McMahon, and Mercero violated the state open meetings law. My resolution to this violation, that these 3 councilors who admittedly colluded to deny the will of the community resign. In the reply to this violation, the City's Council stated the meetings law does not per se prohibit communication between elected officials outside of a public meeting. According to their council, the City of Gladstone is the only governing body in Oregon where a quorum of councilors can admittedly communicate in private to make a decision prior to public discussion. The term per se means in itself. By using the term per se, council does not refute that the open meetings law was violated, only that using one action independent of a violation is not present. In my 40 years of working with council on both state and federal cases, I have never seen this type of ambiguity in a formal reply. It does not serve the city well. The second claim was that my civil rights were violated. Again, the city's council refuted this violation by accusing the city council of ethical and political misconduct. Council's reply stated that he felt the denial of my appointment was about a personal and political vendetta by Councilors Neese, McMahon, and Mercero. Again, in all my years working with council, I have never experienced the accusation of political misconduct by someone paid to represent the best interests of any agency, and again, does not serve the city well. As for my compensation on this claim, my intention is to donate a portion of any compensation towards city programs that I feel have been historically underfunded, such as the library, parks, and the senior center. I was hoping to resolve this locally. However, I am assuming on advice of council that the city decided to escalate my claims to the state and federal level. They have chosen to roll the dice, as it may. Again, I do not believe this legal advice serves the city well. As I stated in my grievance, I have submitted a formal complaint to the Oregon Ethics Commission and the Office of Civil Rights. Interestingly, I did not have to file a complaint with the ACLU, as they contacted me, informing me they had been reading the paper and were shocked. In closing, I would like to thank 2 people for confirming my claim of bias. First, Councilor Milch, who said on Next Door Gladstone, "Of course I have to acknowledge that racial bias may have played a role in the decision." Also, Libby Wentz, who chastised the council for surreptitiously extending an application deadline so 2 white men could apply, then appointing a white man who was friends with one of the councilors, and questioned if this was discrimination towards females. In my case, the discrimination was racially motivated. Libby, thank you for supporting my claim of systemic discrimination on the City Council.
Thank you, Frank. Do we have any other business from the audience?
Mindy Garlington.
Mindy Garlington, Gladstone, Oregon. To the Gladstone City Council, we as tax-paying citizens, voters, and residents of Gladstone are given 3 minutes to speak on any given topic during open sessions. Some residents speak up to remind us of an upcoming event, share a good deed, thank a neighbor, or simply ask for clarification regarding a city concern. As always, there are also those needing to let off steam, and under our First Amendment right, they are entitled to do so. However, many residents take the time and effort necessary to show up, speak regarding a specific topic, provide potential solutions, and at the end of their 3 minutes, hand in a carefully crafted letter. Eldridge Cleaver famously said, "You either have to be part of the solution or you're going to be part of the problem." Residents have put forth the effort to help Gladstone move forward by raising awareness and not just complaining, but by providing possible solutions as well. This effort by the residents of Gladstone should not go unnoticed nor placed to the wayside as a simple note in a file that so-and-so spoke on such and such a day. The City Council or any council that sits on behalf of its citizens should follow up with a resident after their submitted statements during City Council business from the audience. Not following up or simply disregarding a citizen's concern as a mere statement for the record is unacceptable and a problem. My solution to this problem is as follows. 1. Should a resident turn in a letter with a written statement that provides a potential solution or a plan, then it warrants a reply from the city. Whether it gets added to the long list of projects or is determined to be unfeasible, some sort of acknowledgement is warranted in writing. Number 2, follow-up requirements must be satisfied unless the letter submitted includes the following statement: this letter is for public information only, no reply from the city is needed. Number 3, if neither a letter nor a written possible solution is turned in, no reply should be given nor expected. Thank you. Mindy Garlington.
Thank you, Mindy. Next.
Les Poole.
Good evening, Les Poole. I live in Gladstone, as you know. I was on the selection committee for the council position, and while there's some legal things being said, and I don't think much should be spoken at this time about it, I just want to make it clear that a small committee of citizens that makes a recommendation to a council is not making a binding decision or making a decision for the council. We ran into this issue when it came time to consider this convoluted process that hasn't worked out very well for the Planning Commission appointment. And I appreciate the comments I heard that day from Commissioner Tracy and your concerns. Both of you were selected as counselors, and certainly some of the commotion and angst here is not your doing. And I'm just concerned about some of the implications of what I'm seeing and hearing in the community. The other subject in my mind is one that was almost beat to death by me over a period of months, and last night I did bring it up during the Parks Board meeting. We really need to see the contract. We really need to see something that clarifies and we need a legal opinion on what we can do with the property based on what it was condemned for. Again, I certainly believe a big part of that property should be a park, and that was what it was condemned for. But I see us in a real gray area and lacking answers, and once we have them, we can finalize a master plan for that property, and a lot of other things can move forward. In the meantime, that property's been a political football for the last time, hopefully. Thank you as always.
Thank you. Next. That's it. Thank you very much. So the first item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Do we have any discussion?
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor, that we approve the consent agenda items 1 through 5.
I'll second that.
Motion was made by Councilor McMahon and seconded by Councilor Neese. Yes.
The consent agenda this month includes department head monthly reports. We'll probably approve accepting them on the consent agenda, but I just want to call them to the attention of the community. These are wonderful reports, positive, give us an update on the fine work that our city staff is doing, particularly the reports from Public Works, which include photographs. We'll show you where our Public Work employees are actively working to repair and maintain parts of our facilities. So, you know, there's no problem, no need for us to debate the content of them, but I just want to lift them up to you. They're very important, and, you know, if we don't say it enough, thank you to city staff for providing them to us and for all the work that you do.
Yeah, amazing job, you guys. Really amazing. Okay, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passed. Next is correspondence, which we have a bunch of.
Yeah, they're all related to agenda items.
Item number
later.
7, okay.
Well, no, a couple of them are 8 and 9 also.
Right, 7, 8, and 9 are what you have on your dais.
Okay. Do we need to discuss them at all now or during
No,
the...
you can do it as they come up on
Okay.
the agenda.
Okay, then no correspondence for right now. So we'll move on to the regular agenda, and the first item is an addition number 6, which is settlement agreement between the county and Gladstone regarding the library.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, for the last several months, the county administrator and I have been having conversations in regards to the pending litigation regarding the library IGA. We have shared those conversations with you in various executive sessions, as we did this evening, and City Attorney David Doofman is going to provide you an update on the draft settlement agreement and consider for adoption this evening.
Thank you, Jackie. So I do want to happily report that I think we do have an agreement with the county. They've had discussions with the County Board of Commissioners. It's taken some work, but I think that on a going forward basis, we've got a great opportunity here to finally have a new library in Gladstone, and potentially, and that's the intent, a new library for Oak Lodge residents as well. So the agreement basically has one of the biggest pieces is that there's going to be a very large effort to get the public engaged. That was one of the things that the county had a lot of concerns about with respect to Gladstone's plans for the library on Portland Avenue. A big source of disagreement, I think, between the city and the county was whether we lived up to our end of the bargain in terms of getting that public engagement. We certainly think we did. But it became clear that that there would be an opportunity here to sort of reset the clock and begin with something that both parties felt comfortable with, felt that was fair, and sort of untangle some of those disagreements and agree to move forward. So one issue that is different is that it will no longer be one library in Gladstone to serve the entire service area. The proposal going forward is to have two libraries, one that would be on this site, as a matter of fact. It would be a 6,000 square foot facility, and the county on property that they control right now is intending to build a facility for that area of Oak Lodge. Obviously, just like any other county library facility, you don't need to reside in a certain area to use it. But the anticipation would be that Gladstone residents, maybe Jennings Lodge residents as well, would utilize Gladstone's facility, and the remaining much larger portion of the service area would utilize the county building. The county would be operating both libraries, at least indefinitely. There is talk of the city taking over that function eventually. But for right now, the county would be responsible for not only building these buildings, but also once they're established, actually running the operations. The issue that I think was very important to the city and I think also to the county as well was to be able to maximize what dollars already exist, both in the form of the remaining money that was in the capital IGA, as we call it. That's $1.5 million. That's really what our lawsuit was sort of directed at, is after the county terminated that agreement, we felt that that money should still be Gladstone's and used for well, I shouldn't just say Gladstone and Oak Lodge, and used to build that 13,000 square foot facility that we committed to in 2014. Many months went by, litigation occurs, and the parties started talking about potential ways to settle this. We did have one official mediation that we attended, a day-long session that maybe got us a little bit closer, but didn't fully resolve the dispute. I will say, to the credit of this council and the board, you met amongst yourselves without lawyers numerous times, had discussions, and we're able to get to something that's reflected in what you're considering tonight. So the two library approach is obviously different. That was always going to be something that was going to be Gladstone's building, and it would have been operated by Gladstone to serve the entire area. That's changed, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that. But I think everybody finally recognized that the best way, and perhaps frankly the only way, to really finally have a new library facility for the Gladstone service population was to have two different buildings. So the option that is part of the agreement is that there would be no new tax dollars being used to fund this. This is going to be coming out of, for both buildings, out of the remaining money that's been accumulated, both the $1.5 million as well as savings that the county has collected over the years in terms of how they've operated the Oak Lodge facility. And I believe that number is around, in total, about
$3.5 million.
$3.5 million. There will be the revenue that comes from the tax district itself, the library district, and that will go towards funding some of the construction. And then, obviously, in the long term, will be the main source of revenue to operate both facilities. There would be a bond that would be issued to build these buildings, but again, there isn't going to be any increase on Oak Lodge residents, city residents, in order to pay off that debt. But there are a number of contingencies, as ever. There are certain things that have to happen before any of this can be realized. Now, Jackie and her colleague Don Krupp at the county have been talking about having a public relations strategy, having whether it's a series of charrettes or whatever you'd call it, to bring the public in to reflect on this framework and decide what they want to see, in particular with respect to maybe where the county building is located, what size it is, what amenities would be provided, etc. One thing that this agreement does do is it does say that regardless of that public process, that the location for the city facility is decided, and that's going to be where we're sitting currently. In the future, this will come down. You're in the process of building not building, but getting the design and the pre-construction services for the new City Hall police station, the Civic Center, civic buildings. So there will be some changes that are going to have to happen. The master order, that is the order that created really the library district in the first place. The county feels there needs to be some amendments to that order. Those would have to happen. It is possible that those amendments could be referred to voters. So we have committed, if you approve the agreement, if the county approves the agreement, to getting any necessary votes done by May of 2018. That's when that would happen. And speaking of amendments, the city's going to have an amendment. Right now you have authority from 2014 to build the library that we always envisioned building, the 13,000 to 16,000 square foot facility on Portland Avenue. And one of the things that the voters, a limitation, I guess I would say, that they placed on that is that no city funds whatsoever would be used to construct or operate that facility. It would all be coming from library district monies. The reality is that historically the city has subsidized, if you will, since the creation of the library district, about $200,000 a year, give or take, in general fund revenue to operate the existing library. So that will be reflected going forward, and the city under this agreement would commit to that, to continue to have that $200,000 and tied, inflation-wise, tied to the rate of increase in your property tax revenues. So we would need to go to Gladstone voters, and we'd also commit to doing that on the May election as well, and essentially get additional authorization from them to do something that is not contemplated in the 2014 approval. We also have built in some what-ifs if those things don't happen. If the county were to fail to successfully pass any changes that it feels are necessary to the order or to the master IGA, or failed to put it on the ballot, then the agreement would no longer be of any effect, but the city would receive a one-time payment of $360,000. The same thing kind of holds true for if we have the vote in 2018 in May, and Gladstone residents, electors don't pass that. The agreement is terminated. You don't owe them any money, of course. But we'd be back at sort of square one in terms of, okay, what's the next step with the library. Beyond that, the agreement says that within 10 days of both parties signing it, that we will dismiss the lawsuit. Nobody is getting attorney's fees. Everybody's going to kind of go their own way, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Jackie on how much she worked on this. I think her ability to have those kind of hard conversations in a very professional manner with her colleagues at the county was a huge help, and counselors that specifically stepped up and had those conversations with their colleagues as well. It's a different tone. I'll certainly let Jackie speak to that. I mean, predictably, a lot of my involvement has been much more on the nuts and bolts of the legal side, but I definitely sense a much healthier and more trusting relationship between the two parties with respect to this issue.
I agree. I think dropping the lawsuit really provides us a unified approach to trying to build a new library for Gladstone and the folks in Oak Lodge. And the county's committed to making that happen. I'm very confident that it's going to happen, or I would not be recommending that you dismiss the lawsuit. And their willingness to hold the $1.5 million in trust while we work through these timelines, I think, is very telling. This could happen very quickly. It could happen within the next year. And so there's a lot of work to be done. And if the council approves this evening, the next step would be for the Board of County Commissioners to approve it on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. And then we would come back on the 16th and have a joint ceremonial meeting that we could talk about and sign the agreement. So I think that there's some very positive public messaging that this agreement addresses many of the concerns that former leadership and citizens have had, and it's time for us to start healing as a county and a city and to move forward for the citizens of both.
Question, if I may. So you mentioned about the size, 6,000. It could be bigger. Is that not true?
Yeah, that is correct, Councilor Reisner. So what we've decided on that is, obviously there's a limited pool of money without necessarily asking for increases in the taxes that people pay. One of the things I think at least this is my impression, and I think the impression of those who were closely involved in this is, regardless of where you stood on a new library, good or bad, I think one of the threads that ran through that discussion was the city's desire, quite reasonably, to not incur additional tax obligations or additional to basically keep to fund a new library, however it was going to be done, that there wouldn't be a tax increase. So this proposal and this idea, we're dealing with obviously limited dollars in order to not create another levy or obligation and increase people's tax bill. But it also allows for either party, either Oak Lodge, or the county, I should say, but it would be the Oak Lodge area that's served, either the county to decide or the city to decide without violating this agreement, that if they wanted something more than that, something different, something larger, that on its own dime, the county or the city could go forward and seek whatever approvals they'd need to do that. So it does not prohibit that. That's correct.
And that can include a public-private partnership, some other creative ways.
Absolutely. This is the downtown core. This is the site that is going to start that redevelopment, and to bring in that private investment into this project, I think is very attainable.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, someone like to make a motion?
So, I move that we accept the settlement agreement between Clackamas County and the City of Gladstone regarding the library.
I'll second that. Motion was made by Councilor Reisner and seconded by Councilor Neese. Do we have any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
So what time was that meeting on Monday?
5:30, isn't it? For the joint meeting?
Yes.
We can do 5:30. I think that's at 5:30,
Okay.
yes.
So,
In the council chambers here.
So we'd like to invite both the Library Board and Library Foundation to be here on Monday at 5:30.
Yes, 5:30.
So, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, the 16th.
16th. All right, the next item, which is new number 7, is the employment agreement for city administrator. Are you going to talk on that, Ashley?
Do you want to? Ashley did all the work.
That's
so.
what I thought. She'd probably be the best person.
We call this 6B and then go on with the numbers.
6B.
Since the other correspondence is related to the original numbers, it might make
All
it
right.
simpler. Thanks.
I renumbered all mine, so. Okay, 6B.
6B, Ashley Boyle, or Ashley Driscoll, City Attorney's Office. I worked with the advisory group to the mayor, which consisted of Councilor McMahon, Councilor Reisner, and Councilor Neese. And we proposed the attached agreement to Jackie, and now we are looking for approval.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the employment agreement between the City of Gladstone, Oregon, and Jackie Betts.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Councilor McMahon, seconded by Councilor Tracy. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Now you have to start working.
Now I have to build a library. And a
Are
city
you
hall.
sure you want this?
And Jeff's also thinking about a police department, too.
Yeah.
Police station.
Yes.
All right, next is item number 7, which is a public hearing and action item. It's amendments to Title 9 of the Gladstone Municipal Code, also called the GMC. A is public hearing on amendments to Title 9 of GMC relating to graffiti. Staff?
All right, thank you. I believe Chief Jolly is coming up.
No, he's not. He's just standing there.
Senator Fryette. And
Sean's on his way, so he'll be here in just a second. Oh, Mayor, Your Honor, Council, Ms. Betts, it's good to be here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this issue. And we're here tonight to talk about, I believe it's graffiti, if that's what I've read about.
Yeah, that's the first one, yes.
Okay. I also want to say thank you to the citizens, and I appreciate the outpouring of information and the comment on this. We like an open process. We like to talk about these things. This is your community, and we want to make sure that everybody has a voice. Myself and the Code Enforcement Officer, Sean Boyle, are here tonight to answer any questions you may have about this. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of background. I know most of you are probably aware of this, but this did not start as something that was brought forth by the police department. This was something that started a year ago at the town hall. short of a week and a day in 2016, and it was clear from that town hall that the citizens of Gladstone wanted stricter code enforcement. They wanted code put in place, actions taken to ensure that the livability of Gladstone was at its highest possible level. The message was clear. The council directed and made code enforcement one of the top priorities for the police department, and included this in the Gladstone Strategic Plan of 2017 to 2021. If you are familiar with that document, and it's a public document, it's been out there, under objectives, the first objective is to enhance the livability in Gladstone, and under 1.10, proactive code enforcement program with adequate resources. So the direction was clear. The citizens spoke, the council spoke, and we've come up with what we feel are our best 7 tools that could supplement the code to make our livability here in the city better. This is the second of 7 recommendations being presented. We're glad that citizens are here for their input. We want to hear what they have to say. We've listened to them for the past year and have met with and are willing to meet with anyone at any time to get the input. So why graffiti? You know, there's been a lot of discussion on social media, and I can't speak to all of it, but I can talk about some things. Our best information and knowledge comes from what we feel is a broken windows policy, and that goes back to 1982. And broken windows is this belief that if an abandoned place has a broken window and it's not attended to, somebody else will break another window. Then there'll be graffiti. Then people will occupy the place, and it continues to go down this path, showing that the residents do not care, do not take ownership in their property, do not take pride, and trash accumulates, crime festers, and I'm a believer of this. If you don't deal with things when they're small, when they're little, they become bigger things. LAPD since 1990 has been trying to work with the community to try to curb graffiti and deal with this kind of an issue, because they know that it runs rampant in that area, and they're behind the curve, which I'll address now. One thing I did hear or read on social media was that graffiti's not a problem in our community. I would beg to differ. I think it's very obvious if you look and take a glance at your environment, but if it's not a problem or it's not an issue, then this is exactly the time we ought to be getting in front of it. Not waiting to become Portland, to where there's a problem that you're digging yourself out of a hole that you can't possibly get out of. And so reacting to a problem is not what a police department that's engaged with the community is about. We're trying to get ahead of that. So I think that's a good argument. One thing that I did also hear, and it's been kind of sensationalized, and I'm trying to measure my words here carefully, is re-victimization. There's been this thread that this would victimize the victims again. The police department here can't be any further from that kind of thinking, because we work hard to ensure that the victims' rights, their dignity, and their care is taken care of with our police department. It might make a nice line, it might bode well on social media, but we are here to protect victims' rights. Why now? We've been working year over year with citizen input to enhance our code, because the code's had no major changes in 20 years. It's not adequate to deal with today's issues and problems. What we envisioned and what we have done is meet with community members, members of the council. We've solicited input in open forums and during the course of the last year. We've made code enforcement now a full-time position, so that this enables us to be able to address these concerns quickly and thoroughly. Just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, two of our employees sat down with a community member, Bill Osborne, and we sought to engage in having a partnership, that we can have a community partnership to assist us with helping rid this graffiti problem, or people's that are victimized, with a community partnership effort. How we envision this is not the bottom line, where it's a fine, an uncaring police department, or what a police department could do. It's more about being a partner in the community. We envision working with citizens, issuing warnings, bringing attention to the matter, providing resources to victims to clean it up, i.e. community partnerships, and ridding the graffiti at no cost if financial considerations are an issue. Only under the most extreme circumstances would we find ourselves having someone who was uncooperative, unwilling to remove graffiti, could not afford it. We would guide those people towards resources in order to remove the graffiti, but I could only envision that under the most extreme circumstances would we find people that would not be willing to remove it or let us work with them, and that's where the fines come in. So this isn't a police issue, this is a community issue, and the community as citizens have to decide a standard of livability that they want for this community. As a city council, it's the responsibility for you guys to enact or not enact the standards for your community. That's up to you. Our role as a police department is to work with the community and form partnerships and enforce whatever standards are dictated by the council and asked for by the community. So this is why we're here, and this is why we have brought this forward, not in an effort to be punitive, but as a tool to give us to do something about a problem that may not be rampant at this particular time, but we don't want to get behind the curve and be reacting to a problem that we can't dig ourselves out of. I said a lot more than I wanted to say. Talked for a long time. Thanks for bearing with me. I'll turn this over to Sean now, and he can give you the code and expert.
Can everybody hear in the back? You're good? All right. Make sure you speak in the microphone. Sorry.
All right. So this wasn't. These code changes did not come as a result of things that we felt needed to be imposed upon the citizens in the community. I've been doing this role since 2004. Okay, and all these code change proposals are, from input from the community members over the years. These are probably the top 5 areas where we get the most complaints about, where there's nothing that we can do to help them out. All right, we can't address these issues because there's not a code to go out there and address it. Some of the things that are going on there in social media, it's one of the more common themes I've seen out there is that we are making criminals out of victims, and that's a nice catchphrase, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Just because you're a victim doesn't mean that you don't have the responsibility to clean up your property, whether someone dumps garbage on your property, whether someone throws a rock through your window. If it happens in the middle of winter and you don't want to get cold, you're going to have to replace the window. And unfortunately, those are just part of the elements of being a victim, is that there's some element of where the property owner or the victim has to take some sort of action where they otherwise would not have had to do so. And then on top of that, the penalty, if we were ever to get to that phase, is an infraction. It's not a crime that someone can be arrested for. There's a big difference. We're talking about, the maximum fine could be $720. But the only reason we chose that level of infraction would be for like repeat offenders. If we ever get to a situation where someone is simply not cooperating, they're not taking any steps despite our efforts to assist them in removing the graffiti, and then the judge will have the authority to impose as much or as little as that $720 fine. So it gives her a lot of leeway in circumstances where we might encounter a repeat offender who is just simply not willing to cooperate with us. Some drinking in public citations that we've written over the last few years is a $720 fine. First-time offenders, I think the highest anybody we paid was $75. Another thing I've seen on social media is that that people can't afford to go out and rectify this problem. The vast majority of the graffiti that we see around town, especially in residential areas, is probably less than about 4 square feet. 1 or 2 cans of spray paint is going to rectify that problem. Less than $8. And so we're not imposing a significant financial impact upon the victim in those types of scenarios.
Questions?
So prior, let's say there's a vacant restaurant on West Berkeley and Portland Avenue that got, right now I go out and spray paint all kinds of graffiti on it. The city right now has no mechanism to make them fix that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what this does is gives you a mechanism to fix graffiti issues, and it's not going to be a small little thing on a fence post. I see this more for larger commercial occupancies, or like you say, repeat offenders, to where you have finally at least a little bit more of a tool to use to rectify the graffiti. And as far as the judge is concerned, I would bet you even that if a homeowner got to that point to being in front of the judge for the first time, I bet you she would say, fix it, and I will drop the fine. So you just spend your $20, whatever it costs for the paint, $8 for the Krylon, and then it's gone. So I don't see this being a huge, I think it's a good tool to use, and I don't think it's going to be used in a heavy-handed way.
And that's how she's handled other, I used the drinking in public one previously, but other nuisance type of things where there are violations on people's property. And sometimes, at some point we do get to citation because it just is the process at some time. But there's been many times where the judge, you know what, go get it taken care of, we're going to dismiss the citation.
Michael?
One of the other questions that's come up from citizens discussing this on social media has been whether these laws are in some way redundant. That perhaps there are laws at the county level that address the same thing. So I looked up Clackamas County ordinances and noticed that there was an ordinance very similar to this that said you have 15 days from the time you're notified. So if, to use Councilor McMahon's, scenario, a restaurant on Berkeley and Portland Avenue gets spray painted with graffiti, why can't I call the Clackamas County Sheriff and say, please enforce your Clackamas County ordinance on this because Gladstone is in Clackamas County? How would you respond to citizens who ask whether this law would be redundant?
Well, those laws don't apply to the city of Gladstone because the city is incorporated. Those laws don't apply to the city of Gladstone, and our municipal code is what rules the city of Gladstone.
Yes,
and so those,
unincorporated.
if they're not in our code, the rules don't apply. And so all the county regulations, whether it's the parking regulations, whether it's the graffiti regulations, they simply just don't apply to the city of Gladstone. They're not enforceable.
Okay, thank you.
So as I mentioned before, our code has not had any major updates or revisions or overhaul for 20 plus years, and it's just current with today's issues.
Any other questions?
I have.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
So, Chief, here, I have in my notes a couple of times you both have mentioned with assistance by the department, or I would assume somebody in the city helping these folks rectify this problem. Do we have something set up? Do we have a graffiti task force in place, or maybe a group of folks or some other city employees or volunteers that would be able to help these folks rectify this if they did get their property tagged?
So for some senior or some low-income families, we do have some limited resources through the senior center.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have like a specific, graffiti task force to go out and respond and take care of those things. But if that was an obvious issue, we'd contact the senior center and tap those resources to take care of some of those things. We did have a meeting with Bill Osborne where he offered up to go to his volunteer group and see if that was something that they might want to tackle. So we are, still working with him. He's currently not in town, but that's something that we're still trying to develop with him for, some other instances if it's necessary.
So as a follow-up to that, if you don't mind, would we be, if we do start to see an uptick for whatever reason, would we be interested in surveilling? I work for Metro with our RID campaign. We put up trail cameras. We've been able to catch a lot of illegal dumpers. Quite frankly, a lot of this obviously are some folks younger than myself tagging or what have you. It would be really nice to be able to get them to clean up the graffiti around the city. And I'd like to see us talk about a task force to tailor this out.
We do have trail cams that we use for whether not just that we could use for graffiti,
sure.
But we use them for all different types of things. Part of the issue with that is you got to have. They're not always repetitive at the same location.
Right.
If it was Portland, that would be a little bit
right.
Something that we might be more likely to catch somebody doing. Here, we would certainly use it if we saw like repeated tagging in an area in a short period of time. We'd certainly look to install those cameras to see if catch somebody. But if we get one this month here and one over there next month, it'd be kind of hard to predict where we're going to get the next.
Right. So it's not repetitive like over tagging. That's what you're starting to see in the city of Portland.
Right.
It's one tag is going to be over tagged by another group.
Correct.
And so we don't want that here.
Right.
I definitely concur with you on that. Thank you.
Do we still have the juvenile diversion program?
So we do, but there are some problems with whether it's court appointed or other type of community service issues. I don't know the full extent of the details, but we've tried to incorporate that over time, over several years. But there's some issues with a liability for the city, people getting injured doing that community service. So that's the reason why it hasn't transpired. Because we actually looked at whether just not people who were caught doing vandalism, but other type of community service for other type of court situations we looked into, and I think we are told by CIS, the city's insurer, that we couldn't do it because of the liability.
Well, I guess we need to have another conversation with CIS.
So maybe you just answered one of my questions as to why we don't have an abatement program, except for maybe a small one through the senior center. You say it's been at the forefront for a year. Been talking with focus groups, I believe you said. You had talked to different ones, which this is the first I knew that we had been filling out the citizens in regards to that. But so why haven't things got started until yet?
I think what we're looking at is creating the tools that we can use to address the issues that have been brought up by the citizens as well as the council. We've been entirely focused on that. When it comes to partnerships, I don't envision, if this is something you want to adopt, that you wouldn't need to adopt till the first of the year, and then we can work with community members to get something in place. And I believe I've even read that Metro has hazard or paint, that excess paint that you can purchase for
$5.
Yeah, just a few bucks. So there's a lot of things that can be done. We would want to get and engage some community members to get this going. Absolutely.
Shouldn't we do that before we implement a process where we're issuing tickets? I guess that which goes into my next question is, what process would you go through if you spot graffiti? Could you go from there as to what you envision? Because right now you're not doing anything, isn't that correct?
That's correct. Because there's nothing to enforce.
Okay.
So whether it was self-initiated, we see the graffiti, or the person calls in and say, hey, I've been, my fence has been vandalized, graffiti all over, whatever the circumstances. We'll go out and make contact with them. I'll go out and make contact with them. With all code violations, I attempt to make contact at the door. If they're home, then we, have that direct personal contact. If they're not home, often a code violation notice, which is a warning, is left at the door or is mailed to them, depending on the circumstances. And then there's contact information there for me. Basically it tells them, hey, this is what's going on. You got graffiti on the fence. It's a violation of city code. And then, there's steps in there on what they need to do to rectify the problem. Information about where they can reach me at, both phone or email. And then, after someone receives that, if they were not home when I originally visited their property, I always get a phone call, and then I call them back. If they want to meet in person, we meet in person, or we have a conversation over the phone, and then there's a discussion about what the violation is and, the timetable for trying to get it cleaned up.
Okay. So in this case with graffiti, we've implemented this that you're asking us to, and so you've contacted them, and what happens next?
So they'll have it's 14 days, because we modified it out to 14 days. And so that would be the initial part of the warning, say you got 14 days to rectify this problem. But with all of our code violations, we have some set standards on, hey, you got, because we're not going to give somebody 30 days to mow their grass. That's just, a foot and a half tall. But, so we give them a relative period of time, and this happens to be codified that it's going to be 14 days.
Okay.
If there are reasonable efforts to correct the violation, voluntary compliance, then we work with those people to rectify the problem. If they've gone out there and let's say that they've got half of it covered up with the paint, and it's obvious they've ran out of paint, we'll contact them. Hey, what's the status of the, the cleanup? And oh, hey, I ran out of paint, and I'm at work these next few days. I don't have an opportunity to stop by and pick up the paint. I'm going to pick it up on this date, and I'll have it completed that date, even if it exceeds the 14-day period, because they're making a good faith effort to clean up the problem. Then we're going to work with them on rectifying that problem.
Okay, I think we're kind of getting into the weeds a little bit here.
Well, we're asking us to make policy, and so
okay.
You're right, I am.
Yeah.
Because I think that we're getting the cart before the horse, myself, in that we haven't set up any program to help people rectify their...
Well,
but we haven't heard from the citizens yet.
They shouldn't.
I apologize.
Why would they set up a program before we have an ordinance in place? They didn't know that we would have an ordinance.
Well, I think it's just as one of the mantras that the chiefs had pretty much all year about customer service, something that the city should just, if it's an issue that citizens have come to them, and I didn't realize there'd been a lot of conversation that the staff would say, hey, maybe we, instead of implementing a fine process, why don't we see about getting partnerships, which is talked about.
Yeah, it sounds like that's what they're looking at.
But it's been a year, and I think we're getting the cart before the horse. But like I say, you're right. I should have waited till we had citizen before getting into the weeds. My apologies.
Councilor Neese?
How did you come up with the fee of $720? I'm curious. How did that figure come about?
So we have A, B, and C and D violations for all violations that are city ordinance violations. And we settled on the A because it gives the judge the greatest flexibility for repeat offenders. So the first-time offender is not going to pay $720 if it gets that far. It's. I don't have the statistics with me. A majority of our code violations that all have penalties, most of them are $720.
Most of the stuff in the parks.
Never go to court. Never receive a citation.
Does that include drinking as well?
Correct. The drinking in public is a $720 violation.
So if somebody has a can of beer or something and walks across the street with it.
But yeah, that's a separate, that's a totally
All right,
different discussion.
I want more clarification on that.
Chief, did I hear, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Yeah.
Chief, did I hear you say that, I thought that a few minutes ago I took some notes. You said that if we moved forward that we would possibly have this delay time where we could talk about that to be able to put together a plan to suit what Councilor Reisner is
This
discussing.
is nothing that has to go into effect tomorrow,
Right.
and we're going to unleash all of our reserves and start ticketing people. So, you know, they're all chomping at the bit.
Well, apparently you can go down to Berkeley and Portland Avenue and there might start.
Right.
Quite
But,
hide your
so I
stick
think
in.
it's reasonable if you did something by the first of the year. This is a community issue, and we'll help and work with community members that are interested in, that see this as an issue, that would be willing to volunteer time, effort, money for those that can't afford to remove it. I don't think the Nissan dealership is going to have to use that resource.
And they're not going to.
But there are people here in our community that are strapped and on limited incomes.
That's right.
And so we have 3 months for the community to step up and say, hey, we'll partner with the police department.
And figure out a way to, I mean, it's a path to success, and honestly, I think the one thing about Gladstone, and I'll cut this short, Mayor, because I know we need to move, but if we do allow this to become prolific in this community, it is really tough to shut it down. In Northeast Portland, St. John's, where I've lived, and Kenton, I mean, it wiped out the community quickly, and a lot of crime came along with it. And so, I mean, as long as there's a plan, I think I'm kind of resting with Councilor Reisner on this. It's like, let's have a plan before we start to really talk about enforcement on that side.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, as the president of the Gladstone Police Association, we will donate $250 for anyone that qualifies for the income assistance on water towards paint.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you were just briefly, you were talking about partnerships. When I lived in Colorado, and one of the things we worked with, and when you were talking about the juvenile department, we worked very closely with the juveniles, and that was part of their community service to come out and help clean up.
Yeah,
so maybe that's something we can look at and do here.
Yeah, we could certainly reopen that door, but as stated earlier that we had some problems with CIS and insurance or liability issues regarding that.
Yeah, well, we can have those discussions.
Yeah, I think we need to.
Yeah. So I'm
revisit that.
assuming we have some business from some comments from the audience.
Well, it is a public hearing.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I know that. I'm just thinking this might be a good time to bring those up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go far.
Really?
Stay close. All right. Bruce Hildreth.
Bruce
there,
Hildreth.
too. Look at that.
Oh, wow, my name's up there,
Whoa.
too. 7500 Ridgewood Drive, Madam Mayor, Council. I think both Police Chief Jolly and Sean covered a lot of what I was going to say, but I can add in kind of stopping off where they, or starting where they stopped off with the abatement. So 20 years ago, I had a bunch of little scouts that we ran around, tried to do good things, and there was an ad hoc gang and task force, and a lot of what was going on was the graffiti. And part of it was they need to clean it up right away. Schools are on top of it like that. They don't, it's not, let's do this next week, it's tomorrow, you know, it's now. So you clean it up, because if we can stipulate what the experts say, that's the best way to discourage it. It goes away now. So we took these little scouts and we got paint. I don't even remember where we got the paint. Probably us parents just bought it, and we went around and we were told where to go paint, and we painted it. The graffiti never went away. It maybe slowed down a bit, but it's back. I sent Jackie several pictures today just of where it is around town. Why isn't it cleaned up? They just told you there's no enforcement. No way to enforce it whatsoever. So you can go knock on a door and say, hey, you got graffiti back there, and they're going to tell you, get the hell off my property, I don't care. And that's already happened, and so I took a can of spray paint and I probably broke the law because I sprayed somebody's property. But I'll tell you this, I'm not going to let a swastika stay up in this community. Not at all. You know, those are my feelings, you know. And I truly believe that what the officers are saying is the honest-to-God truth. It's not going to penalize somebody that unfortunately had some graffiti, you know. And I can one best Sean, not that I want to, but I've got a relationship with Miller Paint. You know, I'll get free paint, you know, and I'll take these scouts, because I still have relationships out there. We have Eagle Scout projects, and we'll go out and we'll clean this stuff up. It just has to be a willing property owner, and if they're not willing, they should be fined. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next.
Bruce Weaver.
Madam Mayor and City Council members, Chief Jolly and Sean, we all know each other. I own a piece of property on Portland Avenue that's Portland and Dunaway, and I have put up screening fencing around there, and I've been tagged. No sooner get it up, and I painted it once and got tagged again. I retired with ODOT, and we had a lot of problems with graffiti on the different projects around. We had 3 full-time employees in this section that were provided with airless paint sprayers in the back of their trucks, and they drive around and paint graffiti. But one thing I noticed as an inspector, the paint wouldn't even get dry, and it was a new canvas. They'd paint it again. They'd tag it again. And I haven't seen the same type of gang signs here that you see in Portland, but one gang will tag it and then it means something else. Somebody's putting on it. No. It has a whole lot of meaning, but not to me. The only thing that I would like to say is a lot of my questions were cleared up and answered. Although I will state that the Chief of Police stated that it's usually about 4 square feet. I would say that $720 is a pretty heavy-handed fee to do 4 square feet on somebody that hadn't. And then there's another thing about it. We have winter coming on. Paint doesn't stick worth beans or dry in the winter. You could put it up and a rain squall will come through and it's going to get washed out. So I think that those things have to be taken into account. You can't just say 14 days, because there are times in Oregon's winter we don't get 14 days where we don't get a dry spell. I mean, a surface like that will be wet. It'll stay wet. And that's my main concern. I've had some problems with vandalism there. They're cutting tags on the fence and stuff, you know, and I have to go out and reapply the things that I sent you down with. But it's going to be a problem. That's a big surface area. And I've noticed that the mailboxes directly to the south and on the west side, they've been tagged. You know, and the laundry, or not the laundry, but the beauty parlor that was there before they sprayed them pretty good a couple times. I think it's going to be an issue. One thing I would like to see, if and when any of these, I have to assume young men, are caught doing this, that should be part of their community services, going around straightening that up.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to look into.
Because they're obviously pretty good at putting paint down.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Weaver.
Next.
Those are the only cards that we received.
Okay.
I believe, Ms. Bannock, you need to read into the record one that we got from Mr. Osborne that was not going to be here tonight. Mayor, you can read it into the record if you'd like.
It's really long.
I know.
Okay.
I'm glad to tag team if you want.
Bill, okay, we'll just...
Why do we need to? It's here. Do we have to?
You don't have to. He wanted to say that if we did not read it in, he wanted somebody else to read it into the record. It's your pleasure. You have it there in front of you. It's in additional correspondence that will go on the website as written material.
by doing that, are we setting a precedent where we have to read everybody's?
I have not read one before, but certainly it's up to you.
Well, I guess either we're going to read it or somebody else is going to read it. So I'll go ahead and start. Give me 3 minutes. I'll read for 3 minutes. I promise I will go up fast. Bill Osborne, I wanted to share my thoughts on the proposed Gladstone Municipal Code addition regarding graffiti. Let me state clearly that I am opposed to this new ordinance. I do not believe it is the city's place to further victimize crime victims. Let me repeat, this ordinance will make criminals out of crime victims. I do not believe that graffiti is a major issue in our city, nor is the timely removal of it from private property. When I asked, I couldn't even get any statistics on how many complaints there were from residents about graffiti not being removed in a timely manner. I believe this happened because we're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist in Gladstone. The one example I was given was of a neighbor who was unaware that their fence had been tagged. When the police notified the homeowner, they jumped into action. The next day, the graffiti was gone. No threats of jail, no threats of fines, no threats at all. I believe most property owners will act to remove graffiti from their property not because it's a law, but because it's a violation of their sanctuary. Chief Jolly explained in a Nextdoor post that the execution of this law would be loose and that people aren't really going to get the $720 ticket. If this is true, then why implement a law the police have said they aren't going to enforce? I believe we have enough issues for the police to deal with rather than harassing property owners because they have been the victim of vandalism. Perhaps we need stiffer penalties for the taggers. Perhaps we could do more to prevent the crime from happening. I can't for the life of me understand who would think this is a good idea. I have spoken with hundreds of residents, registered voters in the city of Gladstone. I mentioned this proposed code change to them. They were not happy with it. Other than city staff, I have not talked face-to-face with anyone who is in favor of such an unpleasant new law. I believe that property owners have rights. I do not think that Gladstone should be making homeowners association rules into law. Times and people change. Today, luckily, we have Chief Jolly. Tomorrow, we may have to deal with Chief Grumpy. He or she may look at this as an opportunity to raise revenue through the strict letter of the law enforcement of this code, much like some of the cities these words have been borrowed from. We must work harder to stop crime in our neighborhoods. This does not achieve that. This seems like a no-brainer to me. I ask you all to look out into the audience and into the eyes of people you are there to represent. Understand only a small fraction of residents will ever come to one of these meetings. Only a small fraction of those who come will ever speak publicly to address you. Please accept that my words are the words of many who will not step into the spotlight and voice their opinion publicly. I ask you to vote to represent what the citizens of Gladstone want. I ask you to vote no on this ordinance regarding graffiti.
Good job.
So all of you sitting out there, please don't send us more emails that we need to read. No, thank you. All right, anything else?
So,
do we have any questions for staff? Would somebody...
I have
yes.
Just a couple things. On the ordinance as it's printed in our packet, there are some statutory references which I think may have been left over from last month's issue regarding drinking in public. That seems to be the code section that's referenced there. There are other sections in Oregon State Code that refer more closely to graffiti matters, and so I think a correction needs to be made if we are going to adopt this. The other thing that concerns me is it talks about shall remove within 14 days of the graffiti's appearance. When we talk about parking violations, a car not being able to be parked for more than 72 hours in one spot, so sometimes the difficulty enforcement there is you don't know when the car was first parked there, and the neighbor might say, oh, it's been there for a week now, and you kind of have to take their word for it. I think the county ordinance related to this had a time period from the time that the citizen was first noticed by the city of the appearance of the graffiti, and then they had a period after that. And I'm sure that's probably how our officers would report it, would enforce it anyway. That seems reasonable, but perhaps the wording could be cleaned up a little.
Okay.
Well, I'll throw out a motion
We
So-
need to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Oh, well, I move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion to close the public hearing by Councilor Reisner and seconded by Councilor McMahon. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing's closed. So the next item is 7B, Amendments to Title IX of GMC regarding graffiti. Consider approving ordinance number 1480 and ordinance amending Title IX of the Gladstone Municipal Code, Section 9.25.
Well, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 1480, including the proposed changes to Chapter 9.25.
With the corrected statutory reference.
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion was made by Councilor McMahon, seconded by Councilor Milch. Any further discussion?
Just one comment on Councilor Milch's 14 days. I'm 99.9% sure it's when it is seen. It's not when it's appearance. So I don't think that the officer could come in and say, well, somebody told me this was here 2 weeks ago, so I'm going to start it 2 weeks ago. My guess is once the officer or the code enforcement sees it, that's when the clock starts. So it could have been there for 3 weeks, a month, but it's until it is noticed that that's when the time clock starts. Same thing with vehicles as well. They can't, just because the neighbor says it's been there a week, they have to come and mark the tire, date it, and then come back at the 72 hours.
Let me look to the chief for a nod of the head. Is that probably the way? Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passed. All right. Oops, I'm breaking things up here.
Being this is a, don't we have to have?
Yeah,
Of a second reading?
Second reading,
the
yes.
second reading,
That would come at the next
it'll
meeting.
come at the November 14th council meeting.
Okay.
We'll have to carry it over for second reading.
Second reading in November. And same on the next one?
Unless it passes.
Yeah, you only have the ability to have 2 readings in one night if the first vote's unanimous.
Okay. All right, the next item is public hearing and action item number 8, addition of Chapter 5.70 to the Gladstone Municipal Code, also called the GMC. Public hearing on addition of Chapter 5.70 to the GMC, implementation of a transient lodging tax. To hear and consider written or oral testimony on the proposed amendments to 5.70 of the GMC. Staff?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We are very fortunate to have the author of the model transient lodging tax ordinance here. Ashley wrote this for the League of Oregon Cities, and there's many variations that cities can choose to implement. Back in July, we had a conversation with the elected officials regarding transient lodging tax, and that Gladstone's unique in that it does not collect transient lodging tax from its hotel, motel establishments. At that time, we talked about marketing opportunities for the city of Gladstone, and with all the redevelopment that's going on, and ways that we can increase our awareness in tourism. And you gave me direction to go ahead and put together a draft ordinance. Since that time in July, Councilor Neese and I met with the managing owners of both of the hotels, as was referenced in the staff report, and as expected, they're not thrilled that we're implementing a transient lodging tax, and I think the main concern is what is that money going to be used for, and I echo those comments, because I think what we have found in Gladstone is that we need to have more public education about how city funds are being used in general. And so if we are going to start collecting a transient lodging tax, I think we need to be very transparent on how those funds are going to be spent. So in the staff report, you will see that if you collect a transient lodging tax, that state statute requires that at least 70% be spent on tourism-related activities. 30% can be put into your general fund for police, fire, public safety. What we're proposing this evening is to pass an ordinance that first allows the city of Gladstone to start collecting the 6% transient lodging tax from the 2 establishments, and then this next year that we would put a committee together And I would suggest that one of them be manager of the hotel from which we are collecting these funds from. Put a marketing committee together that would bring a proposal to the city council on talking about how we should spend those funds. And then the other 30% would be just transferred in for public safety. So I'm going to ask our city attorney Ashley to come up because there's some interesting nuances that have arose out of the last couple of years regarding Airbnbs and short-term rentals. And this ordinance that you have before you tonight allows us to collect from those entities, but Gladstone isn't necessarily aware of who those are in our city. And a whole nother subject that we'll be talking about in 2018 is the business license program. And part of that conversation is going to be about whether or not we require vacation rentals, Airbnb, short-term rentals to have business license. I think that is the time, and we also talk about whether or not we are going to enforce collection of the transient lodging tax with them. So Ashley, if you don't mind, if you'd like to come up and talk a little bit about the legalities of what's going on in that industry right now, that would be appreciated.
Sorry, I was looking down at my phone. So Ashley Driscoll, City Attorney's Office. So Jackie is right. Last year I helped the League of Oregon Cities research this issue, which is updates to the transient lodging tax in the age of the sharing economy, and specifically how to deal with entities such as Airbnb, which the actual name is online hosting platforms. It's much easier for me to say when I'm doing this presentation just to refer to them as Airbnb or VRBO, but there are other games out there. So I think before we start talking about that, understanding the mechanics of the transient lodging tax would be helpful. So it is actually the transient that pays the lodging tax. So when you're visiting a community, you stay at a hotel, you pay the $100 for that hotel room. And then on top of that, you also pay a 6% tax, so that's $6. Instead of the city going to each one of those transients or tourists and asking to collect the tax from them, the city puts the onus on the transient lodging provider, typically the hotel or motel, to collect the tax on behalf of the city and then remit it to the city. And for that, obligation, or for that requirement, they are allowed up to a 5% reimbursement for their time and efforts. So that's how it traditionally works. When you have a online hosting platform like Airbnb or VRBO, it gets more complicated. A couple reasons. First of all, the hosts are not regular transient lodging providers. They're not hotels or motels. They're individuals who may choose to rent out their room for one weekend out of the entire year, or they may be somebody that has an entire home that they rent out all the time. Those individuals aren't necessarily aware that they have to comply with the transient lodging tax, and they're not very visible in your community. So it is difficult to actually track down each one of those, which one of those hosts, which is the person renting out the room, and collect the tax from them. So what many communities in the state have done is expanded their code to have the onus for collection not just on the transient lodging provider, the hotel or the motel, but for the entity that actually collects from the tourist. So in the case of Airbnb, what happens is the tourist actually pays money to Airbnb, and then that's a pass-through entity that gives the money back to the host. So from Airbnb's perspective, and what their legal argument is they're not an operator, they're not a host, they have no legal obligation to collect or remit the tax on behalf of the city because they're not actually receiving it. Well, they're the entity that is best positioned in this case to actually help the city out by receiving and remitting the tax. So the code that you have in front of you is slightly different than the state of Oregon's transient lodging tax. What it does is very squarely put the onus on anybody who receives the tax directly from the tourist. That person, whether or not they keep any of the proceeds of that tax, that person has the onus to remit it to the city. So the code that you're looking at very clearly covers transient lodging hosting platforms and the hosts. And it's important to realize that they're jointly and severally liable. So if the transient lodging provider, the host, is not collecting and remitting the tax, then Airbnb is also responsible. So you can really go after, to use that word, either one of those entities. So when I'm doing my research, Airbnb, for a variety of different reasons, most of it is that they don't want to have to comply with hundreds of different municipalities' taxes. You know, they're arguing they're in 65,000 different cities across the world. They don't want to know what the city of Gladstone requires in terms of when to remit the tax. They don't want to comply, and so they're putting up a lot of legal roadblocks. How many cities are dealing with that is, instead of, you know, making them comply with their code, they're getting Airbnb to enter collection agreements. And under Airbnb's collection agreements, they'll actually collect and remit the tax for you, but they're not going to tell you who exactly in your community is renting out their homes. And the reason is they don't want you to go in and then regulate them and diminish their client list. So it's not necessarily in Airbnb's interest to help comply with your code because it reduces their clientele. So these collection agreements will help you collect your tax, but they won't tell you who's actually renting it out in the community. And to be frank, many of the cities in Oregon and many of the counties have these collection agreements with Airbnb. The downside to that is you don't find out who the hosts are, and also Airbnb is not the only game in town. You need to go get another collection agreement with VRBO or HomeAway or whoever the next person is. You're going to have to get a collection agreement with them, and you're going to have many different collections agreements to comply with. So my recommendation is that this legal battle is going on, frankly, all over the world. Portland's engaged in it, Bend's engaged in it, to get your code language in place to cover all those entities. And I frankly think it's good code language. It very clearly covers Airbnb and entities. And while you're working on getting those agencies to comply, you can, send out you can figure out who the hosts are. Your community's small enough. I went on Airbnb this morning. I identified 4 homes that I thought were in the Gladstone area that are currently on Airbnb. I'm sure if one of you guys did the same or same research, you'd be able to tell me the address of them. So while you're working on getting Airbnb to comply, you can simply choose to send out enforcement letters to, these 4 homes within your community. Or, you can wait until till you know that you're on firm legal footing, let Portland have the battle for you, and start enforcing then. Okay. So that's a very high-level view of what's going on with short-term rental platforms. Jackie, anything else?
No, thank you very much. As the staff report highlights, it's unknown how much projected revenue that we will get for this. That's why the recommendation is that we collect, and actually a lot of cities now are collecting for periods of time so that they have big projects to leverage their funds for. So unless you have any other questions, that's all I have. Questions for staff? Do we have, go ahead.
So the 5% is 5% of the 6%, correct?
Yeah. Right. Okay. But hotels are paying taxes to the state, to the county, and to the city, so it's 5% accumulative of what they're paying. That's what they get to keep from that. It's an accumulative amount from all of the taxes that they're having to collect.
So we're adding ours onto the county and the
Correct.
state.
Okay. Do we have any business from the audience? Jatin Patel.
Good evening, Jatin Patel. I'm with the Holiday Inn Express here in Gladstone. Wanted to speak a little bit in regards to the transient lodging tax. 6% is what is collected from our guests that are staying with us for the county, and 1.8% is collected for the state of Oregon. It was 1%, and there's a new project in Eugene where the state approved the other 0.8. So currently our guest, and we're charging our guest on a $100 room, 7.8%, which comes out to be about $7.80. The proposal here to go to another 6% is close to 70% of an increase in lodging tax. which would be a little over 13% for every dollar that a guest spends. Few concerns I have as a lodging operator is, one, increasing the total cost of any guest that's staying with us in our Gladstone community. Because for them, if the tax goes to the city, county, or the state, it's an increase in their total cost of the room that they're staying with. For an individual, it might not be a big deal, but for any of our groups that we have that stay with us, that may be traveling sports teams, they might have 30, 40 rooms at a time. Any church groups that stay with us, they may have 20, 30, 40 rooms at a time. That's a pretty huge increase to their total cost of staying with us. Secondly, any transient guests that stay with us provide an economic boost to our community. If they're staying in Gladstone, there are pretty good chances that they're getting gas in Gladstone, they're shopping in Gladstone, they're getting groceries in Gladstone, or utilizing any of our restaurants in the area. So we're already getting a pretty good economic boost from them without having to provide an extra tax for their stay. My third concern is that we really don't have a plan of what we're going to do with that collection of the 70%. Usually it's supposed to be for tourism development. So without a plan, we're trying to tax guests that are staying with us, and we're not quite sure what we're going to market. Now, the county does a fantastic job. Clackamas County Tourism Association does represent all the cities in Clackamas County, and they do market and do a lot of marketing efforts to promote tourism within our county, which represents a lot of these smaller communities that we have, such as Gladstone. So my concern is that, if the city does feel we need a charge, going from 0 to 6% is a pretty huge jump, and that should be much, much lower. But I really think until we have a plan in place where I'm willing to participate on a plan, this should be postponed for a further time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
No.
Anybody have any more questions for staff? Any discussion?
I do have another question, or a question about this. It mentioned a variety of forms of overnight stay, including like in an RV park. The Seventh-day Adventists have a facility where people come in RVs for their convention in the summertime. I don't know if the people are charged for the use of that. Would something like that, would it apply? Would this law apply to that sort of situation? Ashley?
I'll let Ashley take
that.
Yes. So if they're charging for an overnight stay and it fits into the definition of transient lodging, then yes, they would be responsible for paying that tax.
Okay, thank you.
So are you talking about for their conferences? Or are you talking, because they have an annual conference that's like a week long, is that different than what you're asking?
No, I was asking specifically about that. I know that they don't have just an RV park that they operate.
Right, because I think the conference might be different than an RV park.
So I don't know about the conference. An RV park where somebody's paying in order to, basically paying rent for a night up to 30 days. So, once you're over 30 days, you're no longer transient. So in a traditional RV park where you'd go, you would stay, and you'd stay for a handful of nights and leave, then yes, you'd be subject to the tax. But if
it's like 5 nights or 6 nights a year, they have a conference on their church property.
Right, and the property is equipped to allow RVs to stay there for the convenience of the residents, more of whom probably would stay in Mr. Patel's hotel if they didn't have that. To be honest, but I think it's to enable people of a variety of income levels to attend these conferences and to participate in the educational events and other things that happen. I assume that's the reason for it. I think it falls into a different category. It's not something that's open to the general public. Correct. Although I don't think they would prohibit. They invite members of the public to participate in the conference itself, but I don't know about staying on the property.
Well, it's also the city's code. So if the city in Section 5 has a number of exemptions. If that is not the sort of, if you would like to exempt those sort of situations explicitly, you can modify the code to add that.
Okay. Any more questions for staff? Would someone like to make a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
Motion was made by Councilor Neese, seconded by Councilor McMahon. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing's closed. So, next item 8D, amendments to Chapter 5.70 of GMC, implementation of a transient lodging tax. We're to consider approving ordinance number 1479 and ordinance amending Chapter 5.70 of the Gladstone Municipal Code.
I make a motion to accept. Make a motion to accept the transient room tax, lodging tax.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion was made by Councilor Neese and seconded by Councilor McMahon. Any further discussion?
So we'd like to read it, the title into the record and then
Okay.
roll call vote. So, an ordinance of the City of Gladstone implementing a 6% transient lodging tax.
Any further discussion?
I didn't go back far enough.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passed. So because there was a no, we're going to hold it over till November. Okay. Second reading, November. All right, next item on the agenda is number 9, purchase of vehicle in public works from the replacement policy. Consider purchasing a combo cleaner vehicle. Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Excuse me while I get my notes out here.
Uh-oh.
Just bullets, not...
Yeah.
Try to be quick. Well, what we have here is I'm coming to you ask for approval to buy a combination cleaner Vector service truck for the Public Works Department at a price of $400,000. You can see that in your attachment B in your packet. We did budget for this, and it is also in our replacement policy. I know that Councilor Tracy and Councilor Milch was not here for that, and I'll touch on a little facts from that replacement policy. Basically, we took all of our equipment in our whole fleet, and we assessed it, and we gave it a life, and what the industry standard is for that life. Using industry standards, we use a scoring system, and we score our vehicles based on this industry standard system, and it goes up to 31 points. And points are, given from mileage, maintenance history, age, all that stuff. It's severity of duty. Say a regular pickup truck is going to be a real low number. A truck like this is going to be a high number because it breaks down. It's very expensive. You got a whole crew that's down and stuff like that. So it's just kind of, just in a nutshell, what the score is based on. And if you go back to your replacement policy, if you recall, if we stick to this schedule, which is what we have in our budget to do, we are actually going to be saving the city money. And it sounds silly, we're going to go out and spend $400,000 and we're saving the city money. But hear me out throughout this thing and you'll see why. So basically, in the first 5 years is where we're going to do the heavy lifting. As you can see on the chart on the back of that vehicle replacement policy, we do some heavy lifting, and then we get into more of a maintenance mode of our equipment. I did a 15-year plan, and it actually will show, based on with inflation and just what vehicles are costing it right now. At that 5-year mark, we're going to start saving $83,000 a year just in vehicle maintenance. And these are based on numbers that I actually witnessed when I was here for my first year. I was actually watching how much staff time we were in, how much we were spending at the local dealers to have our stuff fixed, and the breakdown time I couldn't capture quite. So this is actually very conservative numbers. You got a crew sitting out there that you just went down for 4 hours or whatever it is to deal with a piece of equipment that broke down. So anyways, by year 15, we're actually going to be working up to about $112,000 a year if you play all these numbers, extrapolate them out. So to get back to this vehicle, what we are asking to do is replace a 1987, yes, I did say 1987, cleaner only truck. This is a truck that just cleans the line. So what it does is it sends a hose down the line, it drags debris back. Well, where does that debris go? Well, it just goes down the line. So you end up chasing down the line, or you just move the problem around. The truck we're going to replace it with is a combination cleaner Vactor truck. So what you do is you clean the line back and you Vactor the material out, you haul it off and dispose of it. You get it out of the line. You guys probably seen through some of our stormwater outreach, some of the lines we found that they're just literally not working. They're plugged completely full of roots and dirt. They have never been cleaned. Well, that's because we don't have the equipment to do it. So that's why we're asking for a combination truck, so you can actually go out and clean that. You don't even have a place to put that stuff when you have that volume of material. It just sits in the hole and you end up trapping your hose. It's futile, basically. So using our scoring sheet, this 1987 sewer cleaner, it scores about 58. And
out of 31.
You remember, and exactly, out of 31. Exactly. So what industry standard says this thing needs immediate attention. Well, we've got about 5 years of that. So we're doing a plan over 5 years to kind of get caught up, and then we're going to start getting into more of a maintenance mode. I touched on this combination truck is more appropriate and efficient. The cleaner only moves the debris around. We've done some research over the last year to find out what is the most cost-effective way to maintain our system. Do we contract it out? Do we just rent a truck, not have the maintenance? Do we buy one? Which way is the most cost-effective? And I'm going to throw a bunch of numbers at you and to show you that purchasing the truck is the most cost-effective way to do it. Right now, currently, starting tomorrow, we're actually having another truck dropped off for 2 weeks. At a cost of $4,000 a week, we are renting a truck to maintain our system. We got some hot spots we want to maintain, get cleared out before this winter. So if we rent it for a month at a time, we can rent it for about $12,000 a month. But we're renting it for a couple of weeks, we're getting it for about $4,000 a week. So if we were to contract it out, it runs about $275 an hour, and you still have to throw one staff member at it. So buying it, $400,000. If you extrapolate all that out, we figure we need a truck about 6 months out of the year. And again, that's not, we're going to do it 6 months, it's going to sit for 6 months. It's moving it here and there. We're going to use it about half time. If you extrapolate out buying a truck for $400,000, renting one for $12,000 a month, or spending $275 an hour, you include staff time. At the end of 15 years, to contract it out, you're going to spend $5.1 million. That's over 15 years, so it's a big number because it's 15 years. If we were to rent a truck and continue doing what we're doing right now, we're going to spend approximately $2.9 million. If we buy the truck for $400,000, we staff it with 2 people for about 6 months out of the year. All the other things are the same. We're going to spend about $1.9 million. So this is the most cost-effective way to maintain your system. So it really comes down to, we got 3 choices here. We purchase a truck, we do it the most cost-effective way, we use one of the other methods, we spend more, or obviously we always have the option to don't maintain. I mean, it really comes down to doing those 3 things. Also, the return of investment on this truck at $400,000, using some of these numbers, is less than 6 years. We're going to pay for this truck in less than 6 years, and we're going to get, another 9 out of it at least. Could be longer, could be a little bit less. It just depends. That's the average of what one of these vehicles lasts when you're using it full time. Okay, that was about it. Anybody have any questions for me?
So this will help us with a lot of that low-hanging fruit that we've been talking about in our master plan.
Yeah, so when you look at the master plan, it assumes we need to upsize a bunch of pipes. We got flooding around. Why is that? Well, we need to put a pipe in here. We need to upsize this pipe. It's not carrying it. Well, we're finding out that, these pipes are full of dirt because they haven't been maintained. So we actually don't know how much pipe, in my opinion, we do not know how much pipe we have to replace because our system is not functioning correctly.
Right.
We need to spend probably about 5 years going through our sewer and storm system, get everything to where it's maintained and operating correctly, and quite honestly, we need to reevaluate what pipes we replace and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't think it's going to be as bad.
So this could have a significant savings.
Yeah.
Significant. And I'd also like to add that I think you guys recalled just not too long ago that our dump truck caught on fire, and if that had been citizens or our employees in there, it's a safety hazard, the equipment that we are driving around town.
And not only, just on that dump truck, that one's scheduled a couple years out, so, because it's not our worst one.
Right.
And, okay, so $400,000, it sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's a piece of equipment. You go out and replace a storm line at about 120 to 150 bucks a foot, you're doing a block of storm line for the cost of this truck.
Yeah.
We may not need to do.
Right, exactly.
I mean, it really, I keep looking at this thing, God, this is a pipe dream, but it's really making sense. And every time one of these vehicles hit the trigger for looking at us, we're going to evaluate it, we're going to assess it. Is this thing really ready to break down? This truck that we have right now, it sits in the yard, and we're afraid to use it unless there is an emergency, because it's got a $10,000 pump that needs to be replaced in it, and we're hoping that it doesn't happen while we have it. You know, because then it's scrap, just like this truck. We could have probably sold that truck for $2,500, the truck that Jackie mentioned. We got it out on the auction right now, we're getting a high bid of like $200. I mean, because it's how much does it weigh? That's how much we'll give you for it, you know, type of a thing. So this is just one of, you know, that sticking to this policy. This is just, yeah, this is the biggest one. So.
And I think, like the mayor alluded to, that with the work that the Public Works Director has put into this, and if we can go in and clean out our existing system and really find out what pipes need to be replaced, we are saving the taxpayers a lot of money doing that.
Right. The truck we have rented one so far. We're going to rent one for 2 weeks coming up. We got some lines that we think we can get some clean and eliminate some more flooding area issues. And then earlier this year we rented it for about 6 weeks and did quite a bit. We're really getting a good feel for how long it's going to take to go through the system and some of the challenges we have. Like some of the pictures you've seen where the lines are completely packed full of dirt. You know, you can go do a block of line. That should be, you know, that should be an hour. Boom, boom. You pull the stuff back, you vacuum it, move on. These blocks of lines are taking us 2-3 days. Because you imagine you got this high pressure water squirting into that, pulling all the material back, and you're just a solid wall of packed dirt. And so the first round going through the city, it's gonna take a while. We're hoping we can knock it out in about 5 years. Again, we got about 40 miles of pipe in town in our sewer. We got about 40 miles of pipe in our storm. So that's what our estimate is. And then after that, it's going to be routine maintenance.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions for Jim?
Just a quick comment. I do believe that's what the stormwater fund fee was set up for, as well as these kinds of purchases.
Yes, and as you'll notice in the staff report, it's going to be split between 3 departments. This is our utility departments. So water, sewer, and storm. You're wondering, well, are we cleaning water lines? No. But if you've seen some of our monthly reports, we actually need to use vacuum excavation to do some of our excavation for our water line repairs. We have about 50% of our water lines are asbestos cement pipes. You can't locate them. And as a matter of fact, shocking to me, I've been in this business for going on 27 years, and we actually had some direct power buried right on top of our water line. It was live. Mm-hmm. If we were in there with an excavator digging that out, oh my gosh. So we had to vacuum excavate that out. Luckily we did have that truck at the time. We vacuum excavated it out. We had to have PG come out there and do like what they do on the poles. They had to put this big old sleeve over it so we can work on our water line. It was the most silliest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's crazy. So that's why water's going to pay for part of it, sewer's going to pay for part of it, and so is storm. So it's split 3 ways. And these are all 3 enterprise funds. So they're, you know, it's not general fund money. These enterprise funds are paying for this.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the purchase of the Evacuator 2100 Plus combination single engine. Oh, pardon.
Oh, sorry. I didn't think we had somebody that was going to speak on this one.
Thank you, Director. Why not?
Susan Liston.
Thank you. Sorry, Susan.
Oh, that's okay. I'm not as persuasive as Mr. Wynot or as good as Mr. Patel, and I don't understand numbers, but I have some concerns.
And she's
Susan Liston, 550 East Clarendon. Let's think about safety first and new vehicles for our city second. When traffic safety is talked about, it seems like it falls on deaf ears until a tragedy happens. That's when it's looked upon, but as time passes, it's forgotten and back to deaf ears. Those accidents are not forgotten by the families of the victims or our first responders. When was the last time we installed a new crosswalk, solar blinking lights, or even a slow or stop sign? Does this sound familiar? No money and manpower. When was the last time we bought a new truck? When there is a piece of equipment or a brand new truck to buy, ears are open wide. We hear all the wonderful things this piece of equipment or truck can do for the city, but can it install safety signs, clean up a park, get rid of graffiti, or give comfort to families and first responders? There are pages and pages of why we need new vehicles. Is this really the priority of our citizens and how they want their limited funds spent? I inquired as to the money, all the money that has been going out. I mean, I'm looking just big picture, and I'm seeing, okay, we got a new police station going, we got a new whatever, city hall going, you're wanting to build a library, we don't have the money for that, and we're going to do all these other things. There's a limited amount of money. There's a limited amount citizens can pay, and you don't know whether the taxes are going to continue to go up or we're going to go into another recession. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No.
In that case, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the purchase of the Vector 2100 Plus combination single-engine sewer cleaner mounted on a heavy-duty chassis pursuant to own equipment quote number 2017-19783.
I second that.
Well, a motion was made by Councilor McMahon and tied for second between Councilor Mercero and Councilor Tracy. Do we have any further discussion?
I just want to say, again, thank you to Public Works Director Wynot for developing the system evaluating the lifetime of our vehicles. You know, it wasn't officially a policy of deferred maintenance around here, but for a number of years, that's kind of how Gladstone has operated. And, you know, it's one thing to crunch the numbers about whether renting a vehicle versus buying a vehicle makes sense, but to look at the bigger picture about having this vehicle available to us at all times, rather than having to go out and rent it on short notice, and being able to staff it when the opportunity best arises to utilize it to achieve these savings and these necessary cleanups of our system. You know, we're going to get to a place where we're not doing deferred maintenance, we're doing routine maintenance. Those are the words you used, and that's where a city needs to be. That's where we can function within a budget quite easily, where we can have the funds available to do the kinds of things that Susan has pointed out to us are very important, equally important to this city. It's not just about providing the services of water and sewer and stormwater. It's about providing public safety, providing good transportation opportunities, everything else. And we can't do it all unless we can do it effectively and cost effectively. And I think you've presented a proposal to us which I find very cost effective, and I appreciate the work that you did on it.
Thank you. Councilor Tracy?
So I would like to echo Councilor Milch's sentiments about this, and I want to go one further and not just look at routine maintenance, but also look at preventive maintenance. We have a system that quite frankly, Public Works Director Wynot has illustrated to me that we have some failings in this system, and that's because of the deferred maintenance. And anyone who lives in this town is going to rely on this infrastructure. So I do appreciate the exercise that Director Wynot put forward with regards to value, return on investment. We had a conversation about how that works out in a larger scheme, and he introduced me to that replacement schedule. It's not just about a shiny new truck. It's about getting our system back online and getting it into a preventive and routine maintenance structure so that we don't have failings, because the cost in the 2017 dollars is going to be very different than the cost in 2022 dollars. You can add a lot of percentages compounded throughout those 5 years, and in that 5-year time span and 15-year lifespan of this vehicle, it will more than pay for itself over and over and over. And I do understand the other concerns about safety and traffic issues, but we have to deal with each one of these things in a separate pot, because that's how the structures are financially and through the budget. But I thank you, Director Wynot, for bringing that forward and making details in that request. Thank you.
Can I say something real quick too?
Sure.
Thanks. So I want to just thank Susan and Dave and others that have spoken up and being involved not only at these meetings but at traffic, at parks. We need the involvement. We need people to speak up. We won't be having a budget get together next year because we adopted a 2-year, but it's in those decisions meetings that the monies are allocated, and over the last several years that I've been involved, they've just been rubber stamped by the budget committee. We need to have people come, talk, get involved ahead of time rather than at the back end. So thank you, and continue. As you saw tonight, we've got a lot of decisions to be made in regards to the library, the police station, city hall, and the 7 of us don't want to be making those decisions in a vacuum. We need your input, so keep it up. Thanks.
Anything else?
I have a comment as well. Susan, I have to agree that it's we don't want to waste our money, but let's be clear that the money is coming out of a fund that could not be used for parks, that could not be used for anything else, because it comes out of the enterprise funds, which are funds that are paid for by your sewer, your water, your utility fees. So we're not robbing parks, we're not robbing the police or the fire department for this particular vehicle. So that's where I think some of the discussion needs to be centered, that it is coming out. It's all tax money, yes, but it can't be spent differently than the way we are spending it.
It's actually fees, not...
And I agree with all of you, because and Jim Wynot, director, he has done an awesome job of keeping clarity and the direction of where the money is going, and he has laid, from the very beginning when he first came on board, he put a plan in motion and said this is what we need to do and the direction we need to go, and he has stayed right on track.
All right, are we ready to vote? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're guiding a new truck. All right, next item is number 10, which is the city grant policy.
Well, she's coming up. Jim, can we have that in the parade next year, maybe?
I'm hoping we have it by then. It's about a 6 to 8 month order.
Well, because it was nice having the other rig this last summer.
All right.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
So, good evening. I'm here tonight for a bit of housekeeping. Hopefully there's not going to be a ton of discussion, but this is coming tonight to establish a grant policy. So historically, the city has not had a formal acceptance policy around grants, and what we find after the fact is we have to keep funding a position, we have to keep funding a project, we have to keep funding something that we were completely unaware of. The flip side of that, it's great news because we really do have really active, involved staff and department heads and volunteer boards that really do go out and do this, but we want to have some administrative oversight before we accept funds on behalf of the city. This resolution does that. Establishing a grant policy is part of best practices from GFOA and GASB and GAAP, generally accepted accounting practices. So I will give you that. I will tell you that the very last page is a page that I drew up of what we've got so far in 17-18 of grants that total $1.2 million that we've never reported on, and we really do need to report on these. We are supposed to be reporting on these in our CAFR each year in a form that's called a SEFA, a Schedule of Expended Federal Awards. So as you can see in the layout, you know, the amount of the award, 1.2. So we're just here for some housekeeping and some direction from council so that we don't keep finding out about restricted funds after the fact.
Oh, did I forget to tell you about the other grant that we're getting? No. I'm kidding.
So I'll take questions.
Anybody have any questions? It's about time, I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, I was curious about the fire department one. I thought it was like $450,000, and you got $950,000. Just, or was I?
No, it's over 3 years, and it's that divided by 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I would...
I was thinking the whole thing was the 400,000, I guess, okay.
Well, so in my collection from department heads, I have copies of the grant.
No,
so
okay.
I'm happy to review that and relook at that.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
All right.
I thought 316 was pretty close, because we talked about it when we were talking about the captains.
It was a 3-year.
Right, well, I knew it was 3 years. I was thinking it was...
we talked about the savings and the difference
Right.
in cost. There were a lot of numbers thrown around. It's easy to kind of...
Okay. Do we have questions
hard
about
to
the
keep
grant
those
policy?
straight.
I do.
Okay.
In regards to the bullet point about impact of grant project on staffing, so on like that, how do you determine as to if the grant is worth accepting? For example, several years ago, I happened to go into Jonathan Block's office when he was here, asking about some land use issue, and was curious as to what he was working on. And he said he was doing paperwork for the helmets that the city had gotten from the state for the bike rodeo, and that we should have. And his side comment was, we should have just bought the helmets, because it would have, it cost us more in his time and effort, plus the police departments. So how are you going to be able to evaluate that kind of stuff?
So in conversations with department heads and conversations that Jackie and I have had, we want to flesh out these grants before anybody has signed on the dotted line, for example. What is the city going to have to do in terms of reporting, in terms of staffing? Is it worth it? Like you said, would we be better off to just buy it ourselves or not, because of the reporting requirements? And there are some grants out there that really do require a ton of required reporting. And I know, Matt, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we would have to flesh that out beforehand and make determinations. There are some grants. I mean, we know, for example, the grant that the fire department got, the SAFER grant, we know there's a lot of reporting requirements. But we felt like with the amount and over the time, that once we've done the first one, the rest are going to follow pretty easily because it's in the same format.
Right.
Well, the grants that I've worked on, when you fill out the grants, they want it broken down.
Exactly.
Exactly how many man hours you're going to be throwing at it. So all of that is up front.
Right,
so
and that would be helpful for us to see too, because sometimes those hours are underestimated, and it's nothing but a thing. But sometimes that nothing but a thing can be a week.
Yeah.
So,
so there's a lot of work put in up front to try and determine what those
grants
costs
are a lot of work,
be.
and I love free money as much as the next person, trust me, but we need to go in with a little bit better view of what that free money looks like.
The real view.
You're covering that. I mean, I'm seeing that, so that's answering Councilor Reisner's question. That's kind of the top of the priority, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, questions?
You've broken down the grants by departments. Do you expect the best way for the administration is for each of these departments to have somebody that's an expert, or do you think it would be more suitable to have kind of one person or a small identified staff of people that really oversee the grants for all the departments and work with departments? How do you see it kind of working in practice?
So as I understand in the conversations that we've had, and Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be the responsibility of the department head, because they have oversight of their committees that, they would need to come to them for approval before they just, because honestly, only one person can sign on behalf of the city, and it's not a department head, it's our administrator.
Well, and my question was not so much obtaining the grants to begin with the approval of the department, which I hope would be the case.
Right.
But the required paperwork, follow-up, the reporting that needs to be done.
The reporting I imagine is going to come through finance, because that's what I do.
All right. So that's your department that would end up with that. We don't need to hire an extra person for the fire department staff to administer fire department. Okay.
Nope.
Would someone like to make a motion to accept the city grant policy?
I'd like to move to adopt Resolution 1117, establishing a grant policy for the City of Gladstone.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Councilor McMahon and seconded by Councilor Tracy. Do we have any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have a grant policy.
Thank you.
The first one. Next is business carried forward. We have some city administrator updates.
And actually, real quickly, I just wanted to remind everybody the town hall meeting is October 18th. It starts at 6:30 at the Gladstone Auditorium. That is where we are going to be doing our annual project update and Q&A. So please come to that and hear lots of project updates. Other than that, I think we've had a lengthy meeting tonight, so I'll defer my comments and just say thank you for making me the city administrator. My plate is full, but I'm very excited as well. So,
all right. Next is business from the council. How about if we start with Councilor Mercereau?
I have got nothing this evening.
All right. Councilor McMahon?
Nothing at this time.
Councilor Reisner?
So, the Parks Board met last night and have moved on to have made a recommendation that I hope will be before us next month on park rules, and they're pretty excited about that. It's been about 3.5 years in the making. Also, we had a citizen bring up recently about changing our charter related to elections, and so I wasn't sure if staff has done anything with that or looking for direction from us.
no, I think I answered that citizen's question on what the options were several months ago, and that's the city council.
So it's up to us then.
Decision on what they want to do.
Okay, so I'll work on that, and then I'll ask you about that later, about the ordinance that we worked on, one last month. This month we've got a couple more to go that they were on the website but haven't been able to find them in the last week or two.
Okay, that's...
So I'll talk to you about.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got something else. I'll talk to you later. That's all.
Councilor Tracy?
Yeah, really quick. So I attended the Regional Water Consortium last week, and they're going to be moving again through a strategic planning process. But what was interesting about that is we haven't been at the table for a while. All of our fellow jurisdictions are concerned about disaster preparedness, given the issues that we've seen over the summer. And also the Bull Run potential for borate in the Bull Run watershed made folks nervous outside of the city of Portland. So we're going to continue to participate with this consortium, but we're there and we're chatting with them and we're talking about water. So that's my report for the week.
Councilor Neese?
I attended Main Street program last week and it was excellent, and there's great opportunity, and I definitely want to move forward and get a marketing committee together, and Gladstone's got some good things that could happen here.
Thank you for going. Councilor Milch?
I don't think it's possible for us to underestimate the importance of the decision we made tonight to extend a contract to Jackie Betts to be our long-term city administrator. One of the things this city really needs at all levels, at the council level, at the staff level, and at the highest administrative staff level, is continuity and stability. And I hope that we have gone a long way to achieve that with that action tonight. And speaking of at the staff level, we had an opportunity individually. The councilors have met with, and I can't remember his name, the man dealing with informing us about the standard of coverage for the fire department, and you'll be hearing about that at a future meeting. But one of the things that was underscored for me in that meeting tonight is that we have staff that work together in very effective ways. One of the questions I was asked during the interview process for becoming a city councilor was, what do you do when you have competing interests in a city? It's very much kind of like the question that Susan brought up tonight about only limited amounts of funds and what you can do with them, assuming we're talking about funds that come out of the same type of general fund monies. Some cities have departments that must compete with one another for the limited amount of funds that are revenue that's available in a city. in this city, we have department heads and departments who know the importance of being collaborative and cooperative with one another. We saw from the incident in downtown Portland a few months ago of when the gas line blew up and destroyed some buildings, about how important it was for those public works people, whether they're public or private, to rely on a fire department. And similarly, I know that one of the strong supporters of our public works department right here is our fire chief, because he knows that if those water pipes aren't carrying enough water to help the firefighters fight a fire, they're not going to be able to get their job done. And we have staff who work together, who see how their needs are interrelated, and rather than compete with those resources, they're seeing the big picture and working collaboratively and cooperatively, and I think that's a great thing for our city.
Thank you. I only have one thing, and that is it's the beginning of the holidays, which is, of course, my favorite time of the year, and the next one we have is Halloween. So we're going to close down Portland Avenue from Dartmouth to Clarendon for little one safety, and we hope that the businesses want to participate. We're going to have a couple fun little events, so if anybody wants to help volunteer and pull this together, let me know. It's only the beginning. All right, that's all I have.
Move to adjourn?
Someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I move
Do we
to
have a
adjourn.
second?
Sure.
Okay, motion was made by Councilor Reisner, seconded by Councilor McMahon and Councilor Milch. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned at 8:48 p.m.
But give me a